the things that are really easy to do on a day-to-day basis, like making cold calls or producing content or whatever it is, they're also easy to skip for a day. So they're easy not to do. And there's no consequence in the short term. If I make cold calls today and I skip Thursday, there's no real consequence per se, but there actually it is. If you think about dieting, for example, I just eat one candy bar a day. Well, the one candy bar didn't make you fat, but the one candy bar a day for 365 days in a row made you fat.
For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Trent Dyrsmid. Trent is a serial entrepreneur, the founder of Flowster.app, and a complete nerd when it comes to creating scalable businesses. Prior to starting Flowster, Trent was a host of the long-running Bright Ideas podcast, where he spent over a decade interviewing successful founders. I had an enjoyable conversation with Trent where he shared practical advice for entrepreneurs and business leaders on systems, process, and technology, and how you can leverage those three to scale an organization. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. All right, Trent, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Samuel, thank you very much for having me here. It is a pleasure to be here.
I've been following you for quite some time. You came in my feed, and I think it was several different content pieces that you put out. I think you've been part of several different podcasts and other marketers that I follow, and you've been a guest. So that's how I think I came across you, and appreciate the opportunity to do this interview. So I was looking over your LinkedIn profile. You've had a pretty tremendous history of starting companies. You've started several organizations before this new company you started. So every entrepreneur has an interesting story of how they became an entrepreneur. I'm sure you have something very similar. So can you share with our audience a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. So when I was an employee, I was always a sales guy. So that's really kind of the hybrid between, I never worked for a salary in my whole life. I wanted to be paid for my performance. And so if you're an employee, sales is the best way to do that. And there just came a time when I had been in sales for, I think I was 29, and I'd already made about $1 million in commissions between 25 and 29. And so I had a bit of money. And I like freedom is one of my highest values. Mm-hmm. I like a challenge. I like recognition. And so if you can be a successful business owner, you would get all of those things. You would get money, you would get a challenge, you'd get recognition, and you'd get freedom. So I just decided one day, and I was not a very good strategist back then, I want to confess. I think I've been actually a pretty horrible strategist for a big chunk of my career. And so there's some luck that's helped me along the way for sure. But I just decided at one point when I was 29, I was like, now's my time. And so I had a 6-figure income job. I was making about 200 grand a year, and I quit. And I did not have another job lined up. I sold my house, and I just took all my cash and I put it in a pot and I started a business. And as much as ultimately I was successful, and ultimately I did sell it for 7 figures 8 years later, if I knew then what I know now about strategy, or what I'm learning about strategy, I would have definitely made some different decisions. But nonetheless, it worked out okay.
Was that the Groove Digital, or that's the Durant Systems business?
Yeah, that one, Durant. It's still in business to this day with my co-founder and a guy that we hired just before I left.
Mm-hmm. So basically, was that a business around, I understand you had something to do with strategy. Was it mostly around operations and systems and processes, or what was
it? It was a managed service provider in the information technology space. So think of IT department as a service. Our clients would pay us a monthly fee, and we would do all this technical stuff for them. It was around that time that I read the E-Myth, and that is the thing that shifted my brain to be really process focused. And even before that, back there on my thing, you can see, maybe you can't, but there's a book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I got written up in chapter 16 of James's book after he interviewed me for the very first system that I ever built. And I was a 23-year-old punk who, my job was a stockbroker. I worked for one of the big banks in Canada. And so, of course, the only way, this is back in 1993, so there was no email, there was no nothing. You just picked up, it's called smiling and dialing. So I was a cold call cowboy. I made 25,000 dials of the phone in my first year. And I know that number because I wrote it down every day. And
Mhm.
why James wrote me up was I had these 2 baby food jars on my desk. And I, every morning, because I hated cold calling, I just needed to do it because I like money. And so I had 120 paper clips in one jar. And every time I dialed the phone, I would just move paperclip. And when I was done moving the paper clips, I was done cold calling for the day. And then I would be in the afternoon and I'd go on my meetings with my clients and pitches and try and convince people to become clients, etc. But that was my very, very first system in business was my, if you Google paperclip strategy, you'll find the article all about me.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've heard some of those things that James Clear explains about how to build nice habits, right? Like I think it's all
Yeah.
about just keeping up with it. I think he talked about like the bad habits are you get immediate gratification, so people tend to do it, like eating sugar and sleeping and watching TV. Whereas the good habits, you don't have immediate gratification, so you're less likely to do it. But if you do it long enough, the results are much better. So
Yeah. The
that's
bad
it.
habits are easy to adopt.
Yes.
It's the good ones that are a little harder. But like anything, and there's another book out there called The Slight Edge, which I highly recommend. And it's all about how you, the things that are really easy to do on a day-to-day basis, like making cold calls or producing content or whatever it is, they're also easy to skip for a day. So they're easy not to do. And there's no consequence in the short term. If I make cold calls today and I skip Thursday, there's no real consequence per se, but there actually it is. If you think about dieting, for example, well, I just eat one candy bar a day. Well, the one candy bar didn't make you fat, but the one candy bar a day for 365 days in a row made you fat. So
Yep.
it's this slight edge that comes from these activities. And so I've always been one to develop systems and habits to try and make sure that I'm doing the little things each and every day. And my CEO's, my daily routine checklist, which is how I start my
Mm-hmm.
day every single day. I know we're going to talk more about that. That is making sure that I don't eat my candy bars every day. That is making
Mm-hmm.
sure I move my paper clips every single day so that I do the things that I need to do so that a year from now, 2 years from now, the flywheel effect will have kicked in and I'll have more momentum than I have today. I'll have a bigger following than I have today. I'll have a more successful business than I have today. And I'll have more freedom in my life
Mm-hmm.
than I have today.
Awesome. Well, obviously you found a couple of service company and now you're onto this SaaS company, right? So talk to us a little bit about the journey from building a couple of service companies and even one sold for multiple 7 figures. And now you're obviously building the SaaS company. Tell us a little bit about where the idea for Flowster came about and why you thought there was a need for a tool like this.
I wish I could say that I sat down and locked myself in a room one day and thought up this brilliant idea, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned to you I got lucky a few times. So luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. So my preparation was in 2016. I started a business that I'm just about exited from. We're just waiting for the deal to close and the SBA to fund for the buyer. But I started this agency. It was my second agency, and this one was focused specifically on the Amazon sales channel. So our pitch was to brands. We would say, look, we know Amazon inside and out. You don't. You know direct to consumer. You know retail stores. So let us handle your Amazon sales channel. We'll grow your sales there. And instead of charging you professional services fees, because we'll just instead buy inventory from you, and we'll at wholesale prices, and we'll resell it on Amazon, and we'll make our money through product sales. And the beauty of that model is I don't ever have to send my client an invoice.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to send invoices to people because they don't want to write checks. Every time you send an invoice, it's going to get scrutinized. They're going to say, is this still a good deal? Should we
Mm-hmm.
still pay these people? Whereas in that business model, all I was doing was sending them checks. Nobody thinks twice. They just cash checks.
Mm-hmm.
And so that business, I was very systematic about how I built the prospecting system. I wrote all these documents, and then I hired all these people in the Philippines to do like 90% of the prospecting, so that all I had to do
Mm-hmm.
was stay in what I like to call my zone of genius, which is the thing that nobody else in the company is as good at as I am. And it's generally speaking what brings the money in. So I was a closer. So I'd get replies to all these emails that my VAs would send, and I would engage these people in conversations. I'd get them on Zoom just like this. I'd give them my pitch, and 4 out of 5 would say no, and 1 out of 5 would say yes. And so we were landing new accounts every week, sometimes 2 a week, and the business blew up. You can see there's a couple of Inc. 5000 plaques on the wall behind me. That was number 254 in 2019 and number 622 in 2020. So I was like full speed going down that road, thinking that was going to be a $50 million business, low margins, but high revenue. And then some luck came along. And one of the people I'd interviewed on my show, who has a training course for this stuff, he got wind of how successful I'd been. And he was like, I think that my students would find inspiration in hearing your story. And would you, and probably his prospective students as well, to be honest with you. And he said, would you come to our conference and I'll put you on stage and you can explain your story. And I said, sure. And I had Flowster was not even a twinkle in my eye at this point in time. And so I got up there and there was 500 people in the audience, and I literally fire hosed them with all of the details so that if they recorded the whole thing or took really good notes, they could literally replicate what I had built. But of course, people don't do that because everybody wants an easy button. So much to my surprise, when I got off stage, I got mobbed, like literally mobbed by people. And they were all standing around me and everyone's like saying, can I buy a copy of all those SOPs, standard operating procedure, that you built? Because I have the same problem that you talked about and I want to get the results like you're getting. And so I was like, well, I guess we could do that. So I talked to the guy who organized the conference and I said, look, let's try it out. You take half. It's your audience, my product, or what will become my product, because I didn't even have a product at that point. I literally just made a copy of my own stuff and took my passwords and things out of it. And we sold $412,000 in the first 5 days.
No way.
Which was a life changer for me because we each made $200,000 that week. I don't know about you, but I'd never made $200,000. I'd made it $200,000 in a year, but I'd never made it in a week
on a speaking engagement.
Yeah, I mean, literally, because when we did the webinar a couple of weeks after the speech, there was a ton of people showed up, and as soon as I said, "Okay, here's the URL to buy the thing," like it just blew up, and people were punching in their credit card numbers as fast as they could, and that was when I realized, oh, okay, this is a thing. Like this, I need to do this again. I want to do this as many times as I can. And so I then called my now co-founder, who's technical. He built and sold a software company. And I said, look, this is what happened. My proof of concept is $400,000 in sales in the first week. We should build this thing. I'll pay half, you pay half, I'll own half, you own half, you hire the developers and design it. I'll tell you what I want the product to do. And so we did that. And that was a couple of years ago. And so now I'm involved in what is, without question, the hardest business I've ever been involved with to run. Running a software company is no joke. Don't take it lightly.
Yeah, so that's crazy. So were they interested in the Amazon SOPs on how to build a business on Amazon, or they were interested in the business idea of you going to retail brands and saying, "Hey, I can do it for you"? Which one was the product that you actually sold?
So they just wanted to get the procedures that I had developed so that they could replicate my Amazon reseller business. I call it an Amazon hybrid agency. They just wanted to copy that. And they saw my procedures as the shortest path with the least resistance to that particular outcome. And so for the first 2 years of Flowster, we made buckets of money. It was great. And then things got harder.
So let's talk about that, right? So I think, just from following you and just from observing what you've been doing, I can kind of name a few things. What I've been seeing you do, you're a founder that's actually the brand ambassador. You on every podcast, every webinar, you're kind of the face of the brand. Most CEOs, if they're a SaaS company, they kind of step away and let the marketing people do the job and they're probably more on the finding the funds and raising the capital and visionary ideas, right? But not necessarily the face of the brand. Very few founders are actually doing what you do. I've also noticed you're building a lot of partnership, right? I think you're doing a lot of, whether it be partnership through SaaS companies that already have a very similar audience that you're trying to serve. So you're doing a lot of content creation through that. You're leveraging webinar as a more of a one-to-many sales strategy from what I'm seeing. Like you're bringing people, adding a lot of value. At the end of it, you're getting a very irresistible offer, get them to buy. And you're even charging, some of the attendees, you even had webinars where you charge, right? Like the masterclass and things like that. So I'm seeing that, and you're just ton of content. You're creating a whole lot of content. So which tells me you have a more of a sales and marketing background. And that's essentially where your focus has been. So tell us a little bit about what are some of the practical things that really worked for you on this third time around building a company in terms of kind of getting that momentum.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, in the first 2 years, we made quite a bit of money, and it was pretty easy because we had the support of one key affiliate. And so the mistake that I made is I rested on my laurels while all the money was just coming in left, right, and center. What I should have been doing was finding more affiliates so that ultimately, when that relationship went away, I had other affiliates to continue to feed us the traffic. But that was a mistake that I made. I didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And around the same time, though, we made some other realizations, is that we sold that original product for a one-time fee of $2,500. And to build a software company, you want recurring revenue. So while selling it for $2,500 was definitely great for cash flow in the short term, it didn't do much to build a SaaS company in the traditional way. And so then we did some testing, and we realized that because that particular audience was, for the most part, aspiring entrepreneurs, people who were still had a job, they had this dream, they wanted to make the dream a reality. Well, the reality is most of those people won't make the cut. So that means they're not likely to pay a subscription for very long. And so when we tested the exact same product on a monthly subscription, to no great surprise, it sold like crazy in the first month because people were happy to pay the first month's fee instead of $2,500. But most of them were gone within 90 days because people just give up. They're like, I got to go watch Netflix. It's easier. Not many people can be an entrepreneur. There's a lot of people out there.
They haven't read the James Clear book yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there selling a lot of training courses with a lot of hype and a lot of BS on the sales page. And they're really good at convincing people to give them their money. And it's not their fault. It's the fault of the people who sign up and then give up. So we realized that particular playbook, which was this playbook on how to build an Amazon business, wasn't going to take us where we needed to go as a company. And then we were faced with this challenge of, well, who should I've got this piece of software that really anybody in any industry could use because it's process management software. Well, how many industries have processes? Well, all of them. But unlike all my competitors who went and, found venture capital money, because my first few years were so profitable, I didn't want to give up any ownership. I didn't want to give up any control. And so I thought, well, I can just bootstrap this thing. And again, in hindsight, it was a bit of a mistake because at the time, if I had been looking for the money from VCs while all that money was coming in, I'm sure I would have got funded like crazy because we had all the right metrics and all the right boxes and everything looked great. But things being what they are, so when that relationship went away, then we had to like relearn how to sell, or not even relearn. We had to learn how to sell the software to people who didn't know who the hell we were, and they didn't really understand what the software was for. And that is not easy to do. You have to have two things. One, you have to have product market fit. In other words, the people who are using your app keep using it. Well, we have that because over the period of years, we did get people that signed up on monthly fees, and our retention rates are really high. Our NPS score, I think right now it's like 70 or 72, which is again really, really high. So yay for product market fit. But then if you're going to scale user acquisition, you also need what's called message market fit. In other words, who's the audience and what do you want to say to them so that they're like, yeah, I got to sign up for that software. So we've spent the last year really working on that. And again, it's not been easy. So we did figure out that marketing agencies really value having processes. But you could extend that and say, well, professional services firms really value having processes, because it's about a split between us, between agencies and just what I'll call consulting companies. Just they do professional services of some kind. And the reason they like processes is because it's human beings doing the same stuff over and over and over again. And, like you need to have processes to make that go. But the other challenge is I thought, because of my experience of selling the playbook to these aspiring entrepreneurs, I thought, well, if I create another playbook for marketing agencies, and then I try to sell it to agencies that are already in business with 2 or 3 employees, it'll sell like crazy, I told myself. And so we did pre-sales in November of last year, and pre-sales were strong. And then I built the whole thing. And then I did this summit in April, and it was a bomb. Not only did not many people show up, but very few agencies, despite strong pre-sales, which really blew my mind, not very many of them bought the playbook. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, well, that's a problem. And what we discovered, and so I tried webinar. I mean, I tried everything I could think of to get small marketing agencies. When I say small, I mean 3, 4, 5 employees or less to buy my software. And sure, some of them who have the mindset for us. Yeah, they found us on Google and they signed up and so forth. But we haven't figured out how to do it at scale. And what I realized is that small agencies, well, they're small because they don't understand the value. Most of them. There are exceptions, and those exceptions will go on to be big agencies, but they didn't read the E-Myth. They didn't read traction. They didn't read scaling up. They just think that, oh man, if I could just, get 4 new clients a week, I'm going to be a gazillionaire. There'll never ever be any problems. I'll just keep on growing. But they don't understand. They don't know what they don't know.
You mentioned scaling up.
There you go.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm actually exchanging emails with Varney, trying to get him on the episode. It would be awesome to have him. Yeah.
So what we realized is we needed to go up market, because when you go up market to agencies with 20, 30, 40 employees, they didn't get that big unless they already understood process. They're already documenting processes. What I'm trying to do now is just show them a better way to do it. So the other thing, we also white labeled a couple of other pieces of software. So I have 2 market segments that I pursue. One of them is SMB, this core audience of small entrepreneurs. And I produce a lot of content on the Bright Ideas YouTube channel for those people. And I'm teaching them about how to launch an agency and prospect and get clients, but I'm not actually trying to sell them Flowster Process, our core product. Instead, I try to sell them Flowster Connect, which is a LinkedIn automation tool, or I try to sell them Flowster Automate, which is a marketing automation tool. Because in the beginning, an agency, they just need clients and they need funnels and leads and conversions and all that stuff. Those 2 pieces of software solve that problem. Some of those folks might graduate and realize, okay, now I'm at 500 grand or $1 million a year, and the wheels are coming off because I don't have any processes. And so maybe some of that SMB cohort might end up buying my process software, but I'm not banking on that. What I'm banking on, and we're starting to use outbound actually to do this. And we eat our own dog food. We're using Flowster Connect. I get probably 6 to 8 demos a week just from my automated prospecting using my own software. And these are agencies that are 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 employees. And now I'm just trying to say, hey, look, what are you building your processes in now? Typically, it's project management software, which is not built for process management. You can kind of make it work, but it's not great because there's some features that are missing, and there's just some use cases that don't work very well. And then I just try and show them a demo of my software and say, hey, look, my software scratches this itch or solves this problem better than what you're using now. Do you want to switch? And so I'm at the very beginning. I've probably done, 15 or 20 demos over the last couple of weeks, maybe 2, something like that. And I continued today. I've got 3 more. Tomorrow I've got 3 more. and then next week I'll have more and more. And I'm using those demos for two things. One, just to learn. There's no better way to figure out how to sell something than to talk to the buyer. I mean, marketing is great and webinars are great, but the one-on-one conversation, you need to understand when they don't want to buy it, why they don't want to buy it. You need to understand the specific words that they use, the specific reasons they object. So I'm going to, at a minimum, I'll learn a bunch of stuff, which will make my marketing better. And hopefully I'll actually sell some stuff as well. And the average contract value, or ACV, of those deals is much higher than our so I call that the mid-market, like 20 to 100 employees. Those deals are worth a lot more than an SMB deal. And so we can afford to pay salespeople a commission. So if I can figure out how to do it over the next couple of months, then of course, to no great surprise, I'll systematize the heck out of everything. Then I'm going to go raise money, because I'll say, look, this is what I did just as one sales guy. I went from here and I doubled my revenue in 90 days. What I now need is 250 sales guys to follow the system that I built and to scale us up to tens of millions. And so that whole, we didn't want to raise money, that's going to get revisited, assuming that I have success selling into the mid-market, which is, so far, we'll see. The demos I've done so far, I get very positive feedback. But we're right in the middle of the sales process with those companies. It takes a while because we don't sell to the decision maker. We actually sell to the champion, the people that use it, and then they have to be a champion and get the decision makers to actually say yes. So the sales cycle is a lot longer in mid-market than it is in SMB. In SMB, the sales cycle can be 5 minutes. In mid-market, the sales cycle is going to be weeks.
Yeah, and I think especially in the agency world, it's probably the operations director who's got issues with the operational efficiency, quality controls, training up and making sure people are up to speed very fast. Those are the guys that are actually in the trenches dealing with this problem that you're solving for, not the owner who's just worried about getting a new customer on board.
Yeah, like we try and get demos with marketing managers. And even right now, we're actually testing marketing managers across all industries, not even just the digital marketing industry, because their job's all the same. And then those marketing managers, they're going to roll up to either a director of marketing or a COO at the companies of the size that we're going after. They're not going to report into the CEO. They're going to be one layer removed. So the decision maker will be the director of marketing or the COO. The CEO probably will not be involved at all, because why would they?
Yeah. If that is then that's the SMB market, like the super SMBs that you were talking to, that, like they haven't really learned the importance, which is what I wanted to touch on. So what have you seen the biggest hurdle for businesses to get out of the rut of working in the business to actually working on the business and building and scaling and trying to have the success that you had with the prior two exits, right? Like being able to sell a company, not be in the weeds, trying to make a living every day.
So for SMBs, it all starts with shifting their mindset. So I call it the SDA mindset. It's actually, I don't think anybody has coined that acronym. I actually think this is Trent Dyrsmid original. So the S stands for systems, the D stands for delegation, and the A stands for automation. If you don't adopt the SDA mindset, you're never going to be able to scale. So typically what happens, especially in solos, they are a tactician. They're a great marketer. They know how to do content, or they know how to do social, or they know how to do ads. And they're like, well, I'm going to start my own business because I'm really good at, say, doing ads. Well, that's all right. And you're going to get to 4 or 5 clients, maybe, on your own. And then you're going to run into a wall. You're now working 60-hour weeks. You're not seeing your kids. You're not taking vacations. You're firefighting a lot. The money's coming in, but you feel stressed and lost. One of 2 things will happen. One, you will burn out and go get a job. And I don't know what percentage of the people that will be, but it will not be an insignificant number. Another portion will just keep on suffering. And then the final portion will realize, okay, I need help. And maybe they'll read a book or they'll listen to a podcast, and they'll get exposed to this idea of working on the business as a CEO instead of in the business as a manager. And for the eager beavers, the ones with the most ambition, they're going to figure out how to make that transition. And I'll give you the cheat code for it. Start documenting your processes, because if you don't, it's another slight edge principle. Easy to do, easy not to do. Well, it's not that easy to do, but Flowster does make it a lot easier and a lot faster. If you don't do that, you're going to always struggle, because most people's first hire, especially these days, is a virtual assistant or 5.
Mm-hmm.
If you are working with people who are not in your office and they're halfway around the world, because they're super affordable and they're great workers. However, if you don't give them highly detailed documentation that shows them exactly how to do the job, it ain't going to work very well for you. And I know that because I've talked to enough agency owners who were like, yeah, I tried hiring a virtual assistant. It didn't work, you know, da, da, da. I'm like, did you give them any process documentation? No. That's the problem. You need to have the documentation. So it starts with, hey, I got to read the book, the E-Myth, the traction, the scaling up, whatever, and the decision to start documenting processes. But that is a very small slice of the pie that I just described, which is why most small businesses stay small, because the owner never makes the transition. They never become a CEO. They're just a tactician. They're self-employed. But until you have 20, 30, 40 people reporting to you, you're not really a CEO. You're kind of like an aspiring CEO. They never even make it that far. They just stay stuck at self-employed.
So let's talk about the systematizing the thinking aspect of it, because especially you've been talking about consulting companies or organizations that are more people-driven, service-oriented companies, right? Agencies. So there's a lot of thinking aspect of it, right? Like there are some repetitive tasks which you can actually have a checklist. Okay, how to onboard a client, maybe super checklist oriented. Hey, make sure you send the welcome email. Make sure you got access to Google Analytics. Make sure you got access to Google AdWords, whatever those things. But what about if you had to think of, let's say, building out a workflow inside HubSpot, or building out a specific campaign in Facebook and things like that? How do you systematize thinking?
Yeah, let me answer your question just by telling you what I did. So in my agency, we had all these challenges. We had to grow, we had to get clients, we had to onboard the clients, then we had to do all the fulfillment after we got the client. So I was like, well, all right. So the very first part of that process is prospecting. Prospecting is not complex. So I wrote all the process documentation for prospecting, and then I hired all these. I think I had at one point I had like 5 or 6 VAs full time just prospecting for me, following my systems. So I ended up with a calendar full of appointments every week, and I was closing deals left, right, and center. So that generated cash flow, and I had my wife working with me. Very quickly after we started landing clients, we then hired an employee, not a virtual assistant. We could afford someone who had a higher level of talent, and they were then responsible for account management. They were responsible for overseeing product listing optimization and SEO on Amazon. Now, we had systems for all that stuff, and a lot of the grunt work for even that was still done by virtual assistants, but now they were managing that. Because remember, I'm the closer. I can't do anything but close. I mean, I could, but I don't want to do anything but close, because that's where the money is. That's my zone of genius. So we just kept replicating those employees as we kept adding more and more clients to our roster, and revenue kept going up. And of course, over time, those employees who knew nothing about the business when we brought them in, well, they're immersed in it all day, every day. Plus, they're getting coaching and guidance from myself and my wife. They matured to the point where they started to improve the processes that I'd written. And that's when you know you got something really cool going on. When your team starts to take your documentation and improve it, or create documentation where you didn't even create it, then you know you're doing something right.
Yeah. So you think, is it even possible sometimes with a very highly critical function that a lot of these things could be systematized or documented? Or are there functions that you just don't have an option, but you need someone with a real world experience, having done the job long enough to kind of fill that role?
There's no clear answer to that. The only thing I will tell you is this: is the things that are most easy to delegate are tasks that are fairly linear. In other words, do this, then this, then this, and more importantly, they don't require the judgment that comes from years of experience. So, no, when you like at some point, let's say you want to bring in a COO. Well, you're not bringing in a COO and then saying, here's all the procedures, just go and do the work. That's not how that works. You're bringing in a COO and saying, your job's to create all the procedures so that the other people that report to you, the other people that you're going to hire, can do all the work. Like at some point, when you have enough money, if you're not wanting to be the tactician, you need to hire a number two. And then that number two, they're going to have extensive experience in some industry. Maybe it's yours. They're already going to have experience with process. They're going to know a bunch of stuff that you don't even know. And they're going to come in and they're going to pick up the reins. And ideally, if you've made a good hire, they're going to completely own day-to-day operations. I don't have that COO yet in my software company, but I can't wait until I do.
Yeah, the Traction book talks about the visionary versus the integrator. That's the function I think you were describing.
I like being the visionary. I like working on the business. I like doing the marketing, like the personal brand stuff. I like making the videos, but I don't really want to do any of the other stuff. I just do it now out of necessity.
The zone of genius. That's exactly what I need to focus on myself. I think I really enjoy these kind of conversations, creating content, marketing. Those things are where I find a lot of joy as well. So I think it's true across all the visionaries. We all have that same desires, but oftentimes we don't have the luxury of finding that integrator who can take and run with the operational side.
Yeah, because they're not. You're looking $150,000 to $200,000 a year of compensation. It might be salary, it might be some form of profit sharing, but like anybody who's really good, they're not working for less than $150. So you got to figure out how you're going to afford that. Now, the other thing, and one of my coaches tells me this all the time, keep in mind when you hire that person, you're not, let's just say it's easy math, it's $120,000 a year. You're not spending $120,000. You're spending $10,000 a month. And you might find inside of 90 days that you made the wrong hire. Well, you blew 30. 10 times 3 is 30. And if you paid a recruiter, then you blew that money as well. So mistakes are still expensive, but you didn't just flush 120 grand down the toilet.
That's true. And if it is a good hire, then you actually gained more efficiency and things in your organization as well. So I know you've mentioned earlier, you've read the James Clear's book. You're all about good habits. You have a daily habit as a CEO, and you do that. You want to give a quick overview of what that looks like for your day, and you had a gift for our audience as well.
Yeah. So it's called My Daily Routine, and we have a copy of it in our template marketplace so that you can give it to, and anyone can get this. It's free. You can get a free Flowster account and you can get this template and you can customize it for yourself. So mine, it runs automatically every day. It's literally the very first thing I do after I'm finished reading on the couch, and I write down 3 gratitude statements. I then open up this checklist and it says, what day of the week is it? And I say, oh, well, today's Tuesday. And so the tasks for Tuesday, there's tasks that happen every day. And then there's also tasks that are specific to Tuesday. So when I put a tick in the Tuesday box, the Wednesday, the Monday, the Thursday, all those tasks disappear. So there is sections. One of them is called Vision and Roadmap. And another one is called Management Habits to Form. So, like when you read a book or you hear a podcast or you go to a conference, you learn something. You're like, man, I really want to remember that. I'll put little reminders in the Management Habits to Form section so that I see them every day until they become a habit, and then I'll take them out. After that, there's Everyday Morning. So I'm going to check my prospecting campaigns. I'm going to set my Echo device to remind me of an hour to get out and stretch. Every hour I like to get up and stretch. I'm going to write in my journal. I'm going to check my top priorities. So some projects that I have where other people are doing the work and I'm kind of overseeing it. I'm going to check my revenue across my businesses, check my cash balance. And then I'm going to, that's kind of like my morning. Now, once that's done, because I never allow people to book appointments with me in the morning, then I'm usually into content creation, almost always, until noon. Then I take a break for lunch. And then in the afternoon, I'm dealing with prospecting on LinkedIn, existing conversations in my chat software, looking at Facebook notifications, looking at Flowster notifications, looking at ClickUp notifications, updating my precision scorecard for the day, which is something that's really important for us for keeping track of our metrics. Did I get any mentions on Twitter I have to reply to, et cetera, et cetera. So by the end of that, once I've done all of that, then I go check my email at the very, very end of the day. And my inbox has been now processed several times by my assistant during the day. So I don't look at this many emails. I look at this many emails. And then usually by about 6 o'clock, I'm done and I go in and I have dinner.
And I think one of your interviews that I've heard, you actually have blocked out your meetings to, like, I think between 2 and 4 o'clock on certain days of the week. So
one
you
to
have
5
a block
o'clock, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's the only time, unless I make an exception with you because I know you or whatever. If you go to my calendar link, they're the only times that will be available are those 3 afternoons. This is another thing that I see most small founders doing horribly wrong is they open up their calendar to like anytime. So you've just handed away control of your productive time to other people. You can never get ahead doing that. So Mondays and Fridays, I take no meetings. Those days are for planning content and shooting content. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday mornings are for special projects. New sales pages, planning a webinar. If I don't have any of that, creating more content, writing more scripts. I produce a ton of content, probably now, because I've just amped it up in the last 2 weeks, 16 videos a week, something like that between my 2 YouTube channels. But I do it in a very strategic way. It's actually 2 long videos and then a whole bunch of shorts. And then the shorts, my team repurposes them across all my channels. It's not actually, I have a very strategic way that I do it, that it's not as bad as it sounds. I can actually do 16 videos in about 3 to 4 hours of work time.
And is there a lot of thinking and research that goes into creating that long form content, and then it's just trimmed down?
It's on my Friday. I've got a section there called planning content, and it's got a whole bunch of links to places that I go to get inspiration, and then some links to some keyword research tools that I use, some links to some content maps that I've created that are keyword clusters. So there's definitely a method to the madness. And then once you get in the groove of creating content, the ideas, they just keep kind of coming. And so I have a whole, it's like a Trello board, but I don't put it in Trello, where stuff that I'm thinking about doing, stuff that I'm script writing for, stuff that the editors got, and then it's approved and published.
Awesome, man. You probably need to turn that into a Flowster playlist for others to use.
It's already done, actually. We have a whole YouTube production playlist, and I'm pretty sure that's in our market. Like, we have hundreds and hundreds of templates in our marketplace. Virtually everything that I ever build for me, a copy of it gets put in the marketplace, and it blows my mind. I mean, some people are avid downloaders. We've had 25 or 30,000 downloads now. But I talked to some Flowster users. I'm like, you ever downloaded a template from the marketplace? They're like, no, never have. What?
That's crazy.
Are you
That's what
nuts?
You're paying for, to speed up
there's
the
people
process.
who want to book a consulting call with me to pick my brain, and I charge $500 an hour to do that because I really don't want to do those calls. But all they need to do is go to my template library, type in some keywords, and they can literally see the processes that I've built without paying me a dime other than getting a Flowster account.
That's awesome. Well, obviously, we can talk for hours about how systems and processes can help businesses grow and obviously have multiple exits like you had. So knowing what you know today, Trent, what would you give your younger self as an advice?
Be more strategic. I actually built an SOP on how to make big decisions. I did not. I was a shoot from the hip, ready, fire, aim, young buck, always in a hurry. And that's not the way to do it. You should be super strategic. The book that I would recommend is called Your Next 5 Moves.
Yeah,
just finishing it now.
Is that the Patrick Bet-David? I love that guy. I follow him too.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, and there's a lot of smart guys. I'm sure there's lots of books on strategy, but when I went onto Amazon, that was the one that had the most reviews. So I thought, well, I'm going to start there, and it won't be the last book on strategy I read. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's very amazing how he thinks. I don't even think he's a college grad. He's a high school dropout.
Yeah, neither am I. I never went to college either.
But that's what I'm saying. Education doesn't. I even tell my wife, my kids are homeschooled. I tell them, it's not about the education. It's real world experience, teaching yourself how to become better each day, 1% better than yesterday. Yep. That's the best way to really grow.
Absolutely.
Well, Trent, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for sparing this time with us, and I appreciate your wisdom and knowledge and life experience that you share with our audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and to everyone who listened all the way to the end, thank you for investing your time, and I hope that you found value in this.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.